hiring. Joining us this morning is Governor Allen, who has served Virginia for nearly 30 years. First in the Virginia House of Delegates from 1983 to 1991, then as a U.S. Congressman from 1991 to 1993. Next, he was Governor of Virginia from 1994 to 1998, and Mr. Allen was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2000, serving until 2007. Welcome, Governor. We're glad to have you this morning. We have a lot to catch up on, but first, you lost your Senate seat to Jim Webb 6 years ago, so why run again?
Well, because I see this as a pivotal time in our country's history. Most parents look at the future through the eyes of their children, and in these last 6 years, I've had a lot of time to spend with our children and with Susan. And our oldest daughter graduated from college at James Madison a few years ago, and she graduated, moved back home because she couldn't find work. She's lucky she eventually did. And I read in a newspaper in Washington, they said, well, these young people, their expectations are too high. And I thought, my goodness, this is America. In America, you should only be limited by your imagination, your ingenuity, and your hard work. And I see things going on in Washington, and every vote matters. They passed this health care tax law by one vote. They failed to rein in EPA's regulations of coal by one vote. And so every vote matters, and I think this is really a pivotal time in our country's history. And this election for the Senate, as well as Virginia, will determine who's in a majority in the U.S. Senate, as well as who the President of the United States is. So a lot of people had been encouraging Susan and me to get into it. And it's easy to tell somebody else to run. But the home precinct mattered a lot. And so I felt that the experience that I've had are ideas that can improve people's lives. And one of the things I care most about is jobs and making sure people have more opportunities. And seeing what's going on in Washington, it seems to be always against us and small business owners. And so I've gotten off the sidelines and into the fight to try to put forward ideas that I know would work. They worked when I was governor. Over 300,000 net new jobs were created. We worked with Democrats in the legislature who controlled it to reduce taxes, make our regulations more affordable, communities safer, and that's what's needed up in Washington.
You mentioned your daughter. You mentioned jobs. Obviously, the biggest issues this election year are jobs and the economy. So if elected, what are you going to do to put people back to work?
Several things that need to be done. Number one, we need to make our tax code more simple, more fair, and more competitive. Right now, the worst in the world taxes are imposed by the U.S. on businesses at 35%. The international average is 25%. I'm advocating in my very detailed plan, my blueprint for America's comeback, that if you reduce it to 20%, over 500,000 jobs would be created a year. The other thing is we're blessed in America with the most energy resources of any country in the world. We're number one. The Russians are second. I want to unleash our American energy resources from our coal fields to our coast. And if we did that in Virginia, first of all, on day one, if I'm hired on by the people to serve in the U.S. Senate, I'm going to introduce a bill to allow us in Virginia to produce oil and natural gas off our coast and then use those royalties for roads and transportation. That'll mean money for us. It'll be jobs. But the same for the whole country, whether it's coal, which we need to be using for affordable electricity rather than what's happening now, which is shutting down coal operations. But all of us will end up feeling that same pain when we pay our electric bill as we feel with the $30 more we're paying every time we fill up for gasoline. So if we do that, thousands of jobs will be created in our country, not just in Virginia, but from the Gulf of Mexico to the Appalachians to the barren North Slope of Alaska. And the government could actually get over $1 trillion in revenues without raising taxes. But most of all, we'd have more affordable fuel and food and electricity. So I think energy is the solution for jobs, for our national security, for our competitiveness. And indeed, if you want an example, North Dakota is the fastest growing state, not because of their wonderful weather and their beautiful beaches, but because they're getting after their energy resources. And that's how we can get an industrial renaissance with common sense conservation, clean coal technology, oil and gas, advanced nuclear, a variety and diversity of sources.
So energy is perhaps the key.
Energy is absolutely the key. In fact, it powers our entire economy. It affects our kitchen tables as well as obviously our manufacturers.
You've been doing this a long time. In fact, George Allen first hit the campaign trail more than 30 years ago when he ran for a seat in the Virginia House of Delegates. In the years since, he says each campaign has been different. So what is his approach this election season? WDBJ 7's Joda Schill caught up with the candidate during a recent visit to Northern Virginia.
Howdy, ma'am. Good to see you. Hello. Good to see you.
George Allen found a receptive audience when he visited the Ashby Ponds retirement community in Loudoun County.
Governor Allen, welcome.
Thank you.
Fresh from his fourth debate with Democrat Tim Kaine the night before, Allen led off with his concerns for the future of the country.
And how many of you believe your children will lead a better life than you have?
And the complaints he's heard on the campaign trail.
We've heard, Susan and I, from many people throughout Virginia who are hurting. They're concerned in a lot of different ways, whether it's a small business owner, some who are in the medical professions, who are getting out of the professions. You hear from families. A lot of folks feel their voices are being ignored, and many are concerned whether or not the American dream can survive for future generations.
What are the most frequent concerns that you hear from people on the campaign trail?
Broadly, jobs in the economy. And then that'll present itself in a variety of ways. In the coal fields area, Southwest Virginia, it's clearly this assault on coal. And people in Roanoke understand it too, because of the railroad and the coal car manufacturing that is done there.
Another staple of Allen's stump speech is his opposition to the health care reforms included in the Affordable Care Act.
I just want you to know very plainly and honestly, I hope to be the deciding vote to repeal and replace Obamacare.
While Allen said he supports some parts of the law, including the provision that allows young people to stay on their parents' policies until they're 26 years old, some in the audience worried that Washington will throw it all away.
And it's pretty dysfunctional up there, and I think maybe it might be a better idea to tweak instead of repeal.
Another question brought Allen back to the point where he started.
Could you be more specific about what is bad about the direction of the country?
My concern about the future of our country is borne out in a variety of ways. Number one, you can take a metric of unemployment. There's 23 million Americans out of work. My goodness, this is America. In America, you only ought to be limited by your imagination, your ingenuity, and your hard work.
As he heads into the final stretch of a campaign that started over a year ago, Allen predicts the race will be close.
It's going to be a tight race. It's going to be really close. Probably going to come down to about 10,000 votes, like the last one did. I see greater intensity on our side. And obviously, I don't go to Democrat rallies. But we see, compared to the last presidential race, compared to 2006, and so forth, that there's much more enthusiasm on our side than we've seen before. We're encouraged, but the key, as in any election, I've always said it, the world's controlled by those who show up.
Governor, you talked about it before, but let's dig a little deeper into energy. You say it's time for America to take control of its energy destiny, and you say your plan, Blueprint for America's Comeback, will not only put the U.S. on a path toward energy freedom, but it also has the potential to create 2 million or more jobs. Elaborate on that, if you will.
Well, if you think of it, the thousands of jobs in Virginia that are related to the coal industry. And it's not just the coal miners and the coal operators or the suppliers. That's a lot. But it also affects the stores, the shops, the restaurants in the area. It affects railroads. The biggest commodity for railroads, you can ask the folks here with Norfolk Southern, their biggest commodity is coal. When Norfolk Southern a few years ago ordered more coal rail cars, they're made right here in Roanoke, Virginia. That company hired 300 more people on to provide those cars, rail cars. Then we have the largest coal ports in the United States in Virginia. So it means jobs from the coal fields to the coast. All of us use electricity. The biggest cost for a, say, data center, and there's a lot of areas trying to get data centers, the biggest cost is electricity. And the technology companies that we have many of in Virginia, here and the New River Valley and Northern Virginia, throughout Virginia, is they need perfect power, no sags, no surges, and they need it to be affordable. So that affects that as far as coal. The same applies with natural gas. The same applies for oil production. And I mentioned earlier in the previous part of North Dakota is a prime example. Another example with the shale gas.